Welcome back to Purposefully Living with Mirriam K Musonda-Salati. Here, we don't just exist, we live deliberately. We align our choices with faith, we grow through every season, and we turn our calling into daily action. The Bible says, "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength." Isaiah 40:31. So if you've been tired, this is your reset. If you've been unsure, this is your direction.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. I want you to picture a scenario for me.
Okay.
You've done everything right. You checked all the boxes, you got the degree, you landed the job that sounds impressive at dinner parties.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you bought the house or found the partner. You basically achieved everything you prayed for or, worked toward in your 20s.
The whole American dream, right? Or at least whatever version of it you were sold.
Exactly. But then you're sitting there, maybe in your car in the driveway after work, or it's quiet in the living room on a Tuesday night, and you just realize something is off.
Yeah.
It's not sadness, not really. It's not depression, exactly. It's just this weird, low-level internal ache, like you're hungry, but you just ate.
The source material we're digging into today actually has a name for that. It calls it the ache beneath achievement.
The ache beneath achievement. What?
Honestly, it's one of the most unsettling feelings a person can have because it defies all logic. On paper, you're a success. So why do you feel so empty?
That is the absolute core of what we are diving into today. We have this fascinating manuscript here. It's titled, "Why You Exist." And it is a beast. It's pulling from theology, psychology, neuroscience, all of it.
It's a real mix.
And I'll be honest, when I first started reading it, I thought, oh great, another book telling you to just be more grateful. But it's not that at all.
No, it's definitely not a gratitude journal. It's actually a pretty surgical deconstruction of why modern life feels so completely exhausting.
And it kicks off with this idea that we have completely inverted the natural order of existence, the modern reversal, it calls it.
Right, that's the core diagnosis. The source argues that most of us, especially in the West, are operating on this very specific and very broken formula.
Which is?
Function leads to validation, which then leads to identity.
Okay, break that down for me.
So I do things, that's my function. I perform well at my job, I'm a good parent, I look fit. Then people praise me or pay me, that's the validation.
The applause.
The applause. And because of that applause, I know who I am. That's my identity. So I'm a lawyer because I practice law and people respect me for it.
Right.
But the source says this is a recipe for a nervous breakdown. Because if your identity is built on what you do, you can never, ever stop doing.
You stop performing. You stop existing. That sounds exhausting, just saying it out loud.
It is. The text argues the correct order. The way we were sort of designed to operate is existence first, then identity, then purpose, and only then, finally, function.
You function because of who you are, not to find out who you are.
Exactly.
That sounds beautiful, really. But let's be honest, that forces you to confront a terrifying question. The source calls it the one question most people spend their entire lives avoiding, usually just by staying busy.
Why do I exist? And to be clear, that's not what's my job or what am I good at. It is, fundamentally, why am I here at all?
If you strip everything else away, what's left? So the mission of this deep dive is to figure out how to answer that without, having a complete panic attack. We're gonna look at this concept of the false self.
Which sounds a bit aggressive, I know.
It does. And how trauma and our own biology basically lock that false self into place.
And crucially, how to move toward what the book calls integration, which is a much, much better goal than just happiness.
Okay, so let's start there. The false self. When I read that term, I immediately got defensive. I thought, okay, so I'm being fake, I'm a liar. It feels like an accusation.
That's a super common reaction. But the source is actually incredibly compassionate about this. It emphasizes that the false self isn't bad, it's not evil, it's a survival strategy.
This is survival against what? Like saber-toothed tigers?
Survival against disconnection. Think about it from a child's perspective. A child can't just sit around and ask, who am I, authentically? They are completely dependent on their caregivers.
Right.
So they ask, subconsciously, who do I need to be to stay safe? Who do I need to be so mom and dad don't yell or so that I get love?
The text calls this the covering instinct, doesn't it? It references that old biblical idea of hiding in the garden after things go wrong.
Exactly. It's armor. If you grew up in a chaotic home, your false self might be the peacemaker. You learn to be small and quiet, to be safe,
Or, if you grew up where only grades mattered, your false self becomes the high achiever.
Right. You build this identity just to ensure connection.
So we're basically building a mask to get love.
We're building a mask to get safety, and for a child, safety and love feel like the same thing.
Okay, but here's the problem. We grow up. I'm not 7 anymore. I don't live in that house. But I'm still wearing the armor.
Exactly. The armor works until it doesn't. The source says the false self works for a while, it gets you approval, it gets you the promotion, but the maintenance cost is just astronomically high.
What do you mean by maintenance cost?
Well, think about it. If you have to be the smart one to feel safe, you can never admit you don't know something. If you have to be the helper, you can never say no. You have to constantly defend and project this image.
It takes a massive amount of energy.
A massive amount. It leads to this deep systemic anxiety.
And this ties directly into attachment styles, right? The text mentions things like anxious and avoidant. How does that actually fit in here?
It's the engine driving the false self. If you have an anxious attachment style, your false self says, I must cling to people to be safe. If I'm not constantly checking in, they'll leave me.
And if it's avoidant?
If it's avoidant, the false self says, I must not need anyone. Dependency is weakness. I'll just handle it myself.
So we aren't asking, who am I? We're asking, what's the best strategy to survive this relationship?
Precisely. And we do this in our marriages, our friendships, definitely with our bosses.
So if we know this, if I can sit here and say, oh, I'm being a people pleaser because I'm afraid of conflict, why is it so hard to just, stop? Why can't I just wake up tomorrow and say, okay, armor off, I'm being real now?
Because of your body. And this is where the source gets into the neuroscience, and honestly, this is the part that made me feel the most relieved. The key insight is this. Trauma is not what happened to you. It is what remained unresolved inside of you.
Unpack that for me. What remained?
It's the residue left in the nervous system. You cannot think your way out of trauma because your body remembers things your conscious mind might have forgotten. The false self sees vulnerability as a life or death threat.
So if I try to just be myself?
Your nervous system screams, danger, we're gonna die, put the armor back on.
So it's not a lack of willpower, it's a biological alarm system.
Your body prioritizes safety over happiness every single time. If being real feels unsafe to your nervous system, your body will hijack your brain and force you right back into the old patterns.
Then what's the solution? If my own body is fighting me, how do I heal? Do I have things to go to war with this false self?
No, and that's the mistake most of us make. The source suggests a really important shift in perspective. You don't kill the false self, you thank it.
Thank it. That sounds a little like a greeting card.
I know it sounds soft, but it's incredibly practical. Imagine you're driving a car. Your false self has been driving for 20, 30 years. It's a terrified kid who thinks they are keeping you alive. You don't just kick the kid out of the moving car.
Okay.
You turn to it and you say, hey, thanks for getting me through that awful boss. Thanks for surviving that breakup. You did a great job keeping us safe.
You're acknowledging the effort.
Exactly. But then you say, I'm an adult now. I can handle the wheel. You can sit in the passenger seat. You can even pick the music. But you are not driving anymore.
That requires compassion, not judgment.
Right. If you judge your survival mechanisms, you just add another layer of shame, which only reinforces the need for the armor in the first place.
That is so much more gentle than the crush your ego advice you usually hear.
It's the only way that works biologically. You have to lower the threat level first.
Speaking of biology, let's talk about the brain. The source has this section on willpower versus biology. I feel like I live my life trying to willpower my way through everything. I will be more patient. I will not eat the donut.
And how's that working out for you?
Spectacularly bad. I usually end up eating 3 donuts out of spite.
Of course. That's because your brain is an energy-conserving machine. It loves what's familiar. Think of your brain like a snowy hill you've been sledding down.
Okay, a sledding hill?
If you've gone down that hill on the same path 1,000 times, and let's say that path is self-criticism, that groove is deep. It's packed ice. It's effortless to slide down that path again.
And trying to build a new habit, like self-compassion.
It's like trying to sled through 3 feet of fresh, heavy powder. It takes immense effort. Your brain looks at the powder, looks at the icy groove, and says, let's take the easy way.
So beliefs aren't just thoughts, they're actual neural structures.
Built by repetition and emotion. So trying to change a deep-seated belief with one burst of willpower is like trying to knock down a brick wall with a feather. It's just not going to work.
So how do we actually change? The source talks about renewing the mind, which can sound a little religious, but they tie it directly to neuroplasticity.
It connects the spiritual to the biological. Renewing the mind isn't a one-time decision. It's the practice of carving new tracks in the snow. But, and this is so crucial, like, you cannot rewrite beliefs if the nervous system feels unsafe.
Why not?
Because when you're in survival mode, you automatically fall back on the oldest, deepest, most familiar tracks. Affirmations don't work if your body's in fight or flight.
So you can stand in the mirror and say, I am confident all day long.
But if your stomach is in knots and your shoulders are up by your ears, your brain just says, liar, we are in danger. Safety has to come first. You have to calm the body before you can change the mind.
That makes so much sense. Okay, let's pivot this to where we spend most of our waking hours and where I think most of our false self hangs out, work.
Oh, yeah.
The source makes a really interesting distinction between calling and career.
Yes, and I think almost all of us conflate the two. We say, my calling is to be a doctor, or my calling is to be an artist.
Is that wrong?
It's dangerous. The source argues calling is an orientation. It's how you show up in the world. Your career is just a container for that.
A container. I like that.
Your career can change. The container can break. If your whole identity is, I am a teacher, and you get laid off, you lose yourself. You have a full-blown identity crisis.
But if your calling is something broader,
like, to bring clarity to confusion, you can do that as a teacher, sure, but you can also do that as a parent, a friend, or an accountant. The calling is portable.
it mentions that burnout is actually highest in those purpose-driven professions, ministry, caregiving nonprofits. I found that so counterintuitive.
Me too at first. You'd think if you loved your work, you wouldn't burn out. But that's the meaningful work trap.
The trap.
When you believe your work is saving the world, you lose the ability to set boundaries. Rest starts to feel like erasure. You think, how can I rest when there's still so much to do?
And that leads to this concept of performance faith. This is a really heavy section. It's about how our survival identity can hijack our spirituality.
This is where it gets really interesting. Performance faith treats God or the universe or whatever you believe in like a cosmic vending machine.
A vending machine.
Yeah. You put in your currency, good behavior, prayer, charity, and you expect a specific product to come out. A good life, safety, a blessing. It's all transactional. If I do this, then God will do that.
It's basically the false self going to church. If I perform well, I will be safe.
Exactly, but the source completely flips this. It says true faith isn't about earning safety, it's about trust. And the ultimate test of that trust, it's rest.
The chapter heading was Rest is Rebellion.
Yes.
Okay, hold on. I have to push back a little here. Rest is rebellion sounds great on a deep dive like this. But if I rebel against my boss by taking a nap on Tuesday at 2 p.m., I get fired, I have a mortgage. How does this actually work?
That's a fair point. It's not about abandoning all responsibility. It's about an internal detachment. In a performance-based system, rest is a reward you get after the work is done. But the work is never done.
So we never rest.
Right. The Force argues that rest is an act of trust. When you actually stop working, even just for an evening or one day a week, you are making a declaration. You're saying the world will not fall apart without your constant input.
You're admitting you are not the general manager of the universe.
Which is a huge relief, but it's also admitting limitation, which feels like failure to the false self.
But it's freedom to the true self.
It's saying, my worth is not tied to my productivity.
We have to talk about suffering. Because if we exist for a purpose and we're trying to integrate, why is everything so hard sometimes?
Yeah.
The source takes a pretty firm stance against the everything happens for a reason cliché.
It warns against what it calls premature explanation. We do this all the time. When we're in pain or someone we love, we rush to explain it away because the pain makes us uncomfortable.
We say, oh, it's a lesson or something better is coming.
We bypass the lament. The source argues that meaning doesn't cancel out pain. They coexist. You have to go through the lament. You have to feel the break. If you skip the grief, you end up with a very brittle, shallow kind of wisdom.
It talks about scar tissue in a really beautiful way.
Yeah, think about a physical scar. It's different from normal skin. It's tougher. The source argues that healed wounds become a new form of awareness. You can sit with other people in their darkness because you've been there yourself.
This leads right into how we handle responsibility. The source plays with the word itself, responsibility.
The ability to respond. This is huge for regaining a sense of agency. A lot of us feel like victims of our circumstances, but responsibility isn't a burden, it's the reclamation of your power.
It distinguishes between carrying and controlling. I think I spend 90% of my energy trying to control things I call my responsibility, but they're really not.
That's the boundary issue. Carrying is stewardship. I take care of what is actually mine, my attitude, my choices. Controlling is just anxiety. I try to manage how you feel about me. I try to manage the future.
If you're constantly exhausted, you're probably trying to control, not carry.
That's a great rule of thumb.
And freedom isn't the absence of limits. That was another one that seemed backwards at first. We think freedom is, I can do whatever I want.
But that creates paralysis. If you can do anything, you often do nothing. True freedom is the ability to make conscious choices within limits. It's the difference between drifting in an open ocean, which is terrifying, and steering a ship down a river. The banks of the river are what give the water its force and direction.
Let's move to time. We're all running out of it. The source draws a sharp line between urgency and hurry. I feel like I'm always in a hurry, so I assume I'm living with urgency. But they say no, they're opposites.
They're enemies. Hurry is fear-based. Think about how you feel when you're late for a meeting and you're stuck in traffic.
Blood pressure through the roof, gripping the wheel, hating all of humanity.
Right. That's hurry. It's frantic, scattered, worried you're going to miss out. Urgency is different. Urgency is focus. It's being fully present because you know this moment matters.
Like a surgeon in the ER.
A surgeon in the ER has urgency, but if they hurry, the patient dies.
And it uses mortality death as the lens for this.
Yeah.
Which feels a bit morbid.
It can be. But the source argues the awareness of death shouldn't be morbid, it should be clarifying. When you realize your time is finite, it strips away everything trivial. You stop putting up with things that don't align with who you really are.
And we fall into that later trap. I'll forgive them later. I'll write that book later.
Later is a comfort mechanism. It's a soft pillow that lets us avoid the discomfort of changing now.
This brings us to legacy, and I absolutely love this definition. Legacy as embedded presence.
It's beautiful, isn't it? We tend to think of legacy as a building with our name on it, or a big statue.
Right, I want to be remembered.
But the source argues your real legacy is the emotional climate you create in other people. It's how people feel when they're around you. It's the nervous system state you pass on to your children or your team at work.
Which connects all the way back to the trauma discussion.
Deeply. The most profound legacy you can leave is breaking a cycle. If you interrupt generational trauma, if the abuse or the neglect or the alcoholism stops with you, that is a massive legacy.
Even if nobody gives you a trophy for it.
Especially then. It talks about anonymous impact. You have to make peace with not being remembered for everything. Meaning is greater than recognition. If you need recognition, you're back to the false self. Look at me, validate me.
So bringing this all together, we've gone through the false self, the neuroscience, work, suffering, time. What's the end game here? The source says the goal is not perfection.
No, perfection is a game for the false self. The goal is integration.
What does a truly integrated life look like? Is it just being zen all the time?
Not at all. It's coherence. It's when your inner reality actually matches your outer behavior. You aren't saying yes when your whole body is screaming no. You aren't smiling when you're dying inside.
You're allowed to be human.
You are allowed to be fully human. It just shifts the metric. You stop asking, is this perfect? And you start asking, is this honest? Is this aligned?
It feels like taking off a heavy coat you didn't even know you were wearing.
That's exactly what it is. And when you take it off, you realize you didn't need it to stay warm. You have enough of your own internal heat.
So here's where we'll leave you today.
Yeah.
We've unpacked a lot from the source, but we want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. It's this concept of authorship.
Right. If you aren't actively writing your own life through conscious choice, if you aren't doing this work of integration, of calming your nervous system, of identifying the false self, then who is writing your life?
Your traumas.
Your traumas, your history, your parents' fears, your old survival patterns, they're ghostwriting your life for you.
You think you're making choices, but really, your past is making them on your behalf.
So the book ultimately asks one question. Who is holding the pen?
And that is the question we'll leave you with. Who is holding the pen? Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time.